Ladies, gentlemen, and young ladies, good evening again. I wish you the welcome to this new Conference Geopolitics dedicated to current events global. In the news, Russia has just given a curt answer at the call of the Minister of Defense Swedish woman calling on Europe to move on in war mode, to stop talking too much, going into war mode. Russia has just responded, and it is the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, therefore the spokesperson of the Russian presidency, which takes the responsibility on himself, is to respond to the Minister of Defense Swedish. The answer is dry, it is short, but with geopolitical and military implications extremely serious. Extremely serious. While Donald Trump seeks to calm things down, we don't know what is this ceased fly that has stung the Minister of Defense. But listen, he just amplified the things. Russia is on edge. Yes, for those who have not followed the statement, the Minister of Defense, Swedish Paul Johnson, said that Europe, it is no longer the time to talk. It's no longer time to talk of defense. We must think war. We must go into war mode to preserve peace. So it is from this Russian reaction that we are going to talk about as part of this conference, Geopolitics, dedicated to current events world. But before continuing the viewing this conference, I ask you once again to share this conference to the maximum. But please share it. The world around you, youth African, must stay informed to be better awake, so that consciences are more awake. We must know what happens between the powers. This allows us to better position ourselves, make us sit better our innermost convictions in relation to decisions that concern us ourselves. That's what it's all about. Let's go deep. Yes. So, here is the official reaction from Russia. It must be said that this reaction is summed up in a real verbal threat and framing diplomatic. Verbal threat and diplomatic framing. Here is the content of the statement's official. Peskov, Dmitry Peskov, he spoke. He said that this European rhetoric sets the powder alight for Russia. This rhetoric puts the powder keg. In other words, Europe is in the process of playing with fire, because at some point where we are trying to go to Budapest to ease tensions, if it is during this time that a minister of the defense dares to say that we must move on war mode, set fire to each other, powders on here, or set the powder on fire. In any case, the most important thing is that the Russia says Sweden wants to amplify things, and then it seems that the Sweden is not seeing what Russia is showing, how demonstration of strength and power. So Peskov continues. He says Moscow is closely monitoring all measures likely to aggravate the situation. He says Moscow is closely monitoring all measures likely to aggravate the situation. So for him, Russia is watching. They spoke, but they just have to take action. If they ever take a measure that is likely to make the situation worse, well, that means to say that Russia's response will be asymmetrical, immediate, imminent. That's clear. Russia's response will not be long in coming at all. So what is Russia's goal? Research behind this verbal threat. First, it is to deter by the word show that responsibility of an escalation falls to the Western initiators. For Russia, if there is escalation, these are the Westerners who initiated it. In any case, Russia observes all measures likely to worsen the situation. Russia will react, and Russia will not at all responsible. So this means concretely that Europe is playing with fire. Russia observes and prepares his response. And so we are witnessing a kind of media instrumentalization. There you go. Blame NATO, this is Moscow's tactic. Moscow qualifies the idea that NATO and the Union European, at least Moscow has amplified. Moscow amplifies the idea that NATO and the European Union militarizes the continent and present Russia as a victim forced to react. Here is the strategy. Russia is not losing either. In the context of this war cold, there is the media side. Russia is not acting on Europe. If already against Russia, a minister of the NATO defense, of a member country of NATO and member country of the Union European, says we must move into mode war against Russia, Russia already presents itself as a victim that NATO will force to act. And for the good moment, You see, the statements of Russia are well calculated. Moment, we don't want it. But if this happened in Russia begins to hit Europe, they will say that no, they pushed us to act. They are the ones who said for themselves that we have to go into war mode, and they have committed such an act which aggravated the situation. That's why we have reacted like this. Russia will have something to say before the international community, before the court, before the world entire. So European public opinion is targeted. So Russia's objective is to sow doubt in public opinion, the opinion within the opinion European, and to put a kind of reassurance that Russia is not responsible, nothing, and that if something would happen, Russia would have been obliged. And so what does this mean in concrete terms? Concretely, if the war returns in Europe, it will not be Russia who will have wanted it, but those who prepare it, those who are preparing for it, since they now say that we must prepare to the war against Russia. Now, what are the military and diplomatic contractions which are in preparation on the Russian side? Of course, we attend the increased surveillance and the Russia's defensive posture in the Baltic Sea. You know that the Sea Baltic is the Gordian knot of everything that is happening. Pass. We are witnessing the strengthening of air and sea patrols at Singrade and the Baltic Sea, and we have the activation of the S-400 systems of the Baltic Fleet to prevent any attempted approach. This clearly means that Russia is on guard. Russia is watching his space. Any attempt to approach, Russia will consider it as a situation is getting worse, and Russia will respond automatically, since when a defense minister says it is necessary, Russia does not know how to switch to war mode, not when they will pass in war mode. It's very clear. So if Europe enters war mode, so Moscow will switch to deterrence mode total. And so here, obviously, the situation we are facing finds this is the Russian air repose. So ladies, gentlemen, and young ladies, so thank you for sharing the conference at maximum. I'll get back to you later with new news. It was the voice of your humble servant, the Samurai.